Well, despite what you see on primetime dramas, it's usually pretty easy to figure out who committed a murder. The hard part is proving it.
But detectives in Ozaukee County are facing just the opposite in one baffling cold case. They tell Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson they have plenty of evidence, just no one who matches it.
And Brad and Kat, when Traci Hammerberg's body was found in a remote area near Grafton, December of 1984, detectives expected they would solve the case quickly. They had a rich list of possible suspects and a crucial piece of evidence. But more than 25 years later, they are still on the hunt for Traci's killer.
Moving right along.
Traumatic events have a way of burning seemingly unimportant things into your memory.
We're moving right along.
Like what you were doing the night you found out your sister had been murdered.
Watching a Muppet movie.
Hey, Fozzie, I want you to turn left if you come to a fork in the road.
It was 1984. Jennifer Lubke was 6 years old, at home, watching television with her parents. Her sister Traci had gone out with friends the night before. She never came home.
And you know how they break in tonight at 10?
The owner of the property found the body along his driveway about 10 minutes to 6.
They said, girl found 18 years old, Grafton.
Why would the partially clothed body of a young woman be dumped off here of all places?
My mom just kind of, oh my God, I think that's Traci. She made phone calls, and I remember her shipping me off next door to the neighbors.
Earlier that morning, a homeowner in a secluded area south of Saukville had found the body of a young woman lying in the snow, halfway up his winding private drive. She was naked from the chest down, but for a pair of red socks. Her blue jeans were cast aside, her head surrounded by blood. 18-year-old Traci Hammerberg had been raped and beaten to death.
In 1984, murder in Ozaukee County was a big deal. It just didn't happen.
It is a picture postcard setting.
Then Sheriff Fernando Perez assured residents in the area that finding Traci's killer was simply a matter of time. The clock is still ticking a quarter of a century later.
We feel we've got the evidence to solve this case. We just need to link that evidence to a person. And that's what we've been unable to do for 25 years.
Now detectives are unlocking the past and giving the Fox 6 investigators exclusive access to the Hammerberg files, binders full of police reports, their pages yellowed with age.
There's a lot of trauma to the head.
Crime scene photos, most too graphic for television.
You can look at all these.
Minute-by-minute timelines.
This is for sure where we last know she was at.
Even a guided tour of Traci's last night alive.
Traci was involved in the drug world. She was kind of known as a party girl.
Just hours before Traci died, she attended a small house party in Port Washington. She went upstairs with 3 friends to play a drinking game known as quarters. According to reports, they drank and did drugs for about an hour and a half. And then, shortly before midnight, Traci walked home. Or so goes one story.
We've got at least 3 or 4 different stories as to how she left the house.
Traci didn't have a car. She would usually walk or hitch a ride with friends. But if Traci had walked the 4 miles back to her home in Saukville, investigators figure surely someone would have seen her.
It was all over the news that this girl had been killed, and I would have thought that if someone would have seen her walking between point A and point B, we would have gotten a phone call. Anonymous call, something saying, I saw her here, and we didn't get any of that.
Yeah, I got no doubt in my mind she was in somebody's car.
The question is, whose car did she get into? Where did they go that night? And how did she end up out here more than 5 hours later, so far off the beaten path?
If you drive down that road, there's 1,000 spots if you want to get rid of a body that we were thinking. But why this driveway?
The owner of the property where Traci was found had adult children who police say were known drug users too. Their circle of friends overlapped with Traci's.
There's a drug connection here, there's a drug connection here.
Detectives had a litany of potential suspects. There was Traci's boyfriend, whose class ring was still on her finger, her best friend, who often gave her a lift, the young men she was partying with in Port Washington, and the ones at the house where her body was found. Even Traci's stepfather was under the microscope for a time.
I think it's kids that was on dope. Get off that crap.
All of them were ultimately cleared by physical evidence.
We have semen that we believe links the killer to our crime.
DNA testing was not available in 1984, but blood tests helped narrow down the suspect pool, and that led investigators to Dale Schultz. Not only did his blood match, he had once pursued Traci romantically. He'd asked a friend to clean blood off his jacket. He was in the area the night she died, and he had no alibi.
If you would sit down and read this thing from cover to cover, it would read like a mystery novel, and at least 3 or 4 times you would think as you're reading it, this is going to be the guy at the end of the story who's the murderer. And all of a sudden, 10 pages later, not him, move on to the next one.
DNA testing eventually cleared Schultz, too, but the new technology would allow investigators to cast a much wider net.
My thought was, all we have to do is get enough samples. And sooner or later, we were going to hit the right guy.
Lieutenant Rodney Galbraith oversaw the case in the 1990s. Since then, investigators have continued to interview anyone they can find with ties to Traci.
My name is Dean Milbach. I'm a detective from the Sheriff's Department.
But it's not just the information they want.
Nice and rigorously, up and down, twirling it around.
It's cheek cells.
They were just swabbing everybody that they were talking to, and they, took a swab from me too.
Brian Stenberg volunteered his DNA, anything to help find Traci's killer.
I've been curious about it for years,
He is one of more than 230 people tested so far without a match.
We have the unfortunate record of having the most DNA samples for a cold case submitted to the crime lab.
We got to be closing in.
They haven't run out of names yet.
We always try to keep one in the hopper, just so you know that there's a possibility that the phone's gonna ring.
That means a lot to me. More than anyone can know, at least somebody cares.
For Jennifer, the pain of losing a big sister is matched only by the fear she might never know who did it. Her parents died without that answer.
And in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, I'm gonna die not knowing too.
It is my hope in doing this story that someone sees it and, their conscience has been weighing on them.
Those images of what you're doing, you would think that would be burned into somebody's brain so bad that they wouldn't be able to take that.
After all,
life's like a movie, write your own ending.
There are some things.
Bill Hudson, TV6 News in the town of Grafton.
You never forget.
If you have information that might help, call the Ozaukee County Sheriff's Department at 262-284-7172. You can find more contact information right now on our website at fox6now.com. Now, while you jot that down, investigators tell me that many people over the years have confused Hammerberg's murder with that of her friend, 18-year-old Wendy Smith, who was also killed in Port Washington just 7 months later. Smith's killer was eventually caught, but the Hammerberg case remains unsolved.
And they ruled out that it wasn't Smith's killer that
That's
killed.
correct,
Yeah.
right.
You mentioned that Traci was beaten to death. Did they ever get a murder weapon?
No, there was no murder weapon ever found. And while investigators do have their theories about what the killer might have used, that's one thing they're still playing close to the vest. Remember, of course, if they do get a DNA match, they still have to prove the case. So there are some things they want to ensure that only they and the killer would know.
You know, it's sort of creepy to think, but we've been promoting this story for a number of days. Sure. And if the killer is in this area, there's a good chance that person saw this promo and is watching right now to find out what you found out.
Certainly.
And, you wonder if that might just jog the person.
Well, that or someone who maybe they've confided something into over the years. They're hoping someone will come forward.
All right, great. Thank you, Brian.
You got it.
A popular outlet store in Milwaukee will be closing soon. It's in your business news. And the solution? A piece of steel about the size of a postal stamp. Toyota says it is the fix for those sticking gas pedals. So when will the dealers get it? And the Valentine's Day dilemma, will the recession take a toll on your love life?